Welcome everybody to this latest Values Jam, which is part of the Guest Session series. And Beth, great to have you here today. To start off with, perhaps you could introduce yourself.
Yeah, so hi, my name is Beth, and I am currently studying to become a children's nurse at Birmingham Children's Hospital. I'm also part of the youth advisory group, which I joined that group quite a while before I did nursing. And that is a group trying to make services more young person centered. So we kind of work together on projects. For example, I'm currently working on bed space signage to make it more inclusive, including like pronouns, parent name, phonetic spelling, more inclusive. And we kind of run similar kind of projects throughout the year. I'm also part of a student nurse network and do a bit of like kind of promoting student nursing and supporting each other. I'm also part of NHS Youth Forum, which is similar to the youth advisory group. We're currently working on some mental health projects. I volunteer for quite a few different trusts, which is all very exciting, and I love that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's a bit about me.
It sounds like you must have a clone of yourself to do all of that.
You don't want to look in my diary, honestly. It's a bit of a nightmare sometimes, but it's all good.
All right, well, let's get into it. So here's the Values Jam card deck. And so first, I need you to tell me how many times I should cut the deck.
3 times.
3 times. Okay, so I'm going to have 4 piles in front of me. And would you like pile 1, 2, 3, or 4?
3 again.
Okay. And now we've got 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 cards. So which number between 1 and 10?
We'll go 7.
7. Okay. So this is our card.
Relationships. Okay.
Oh, you sound a bit wary there.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the first question is this. What does the word relationships mean? And what does it look, feel, and sound like?
Okay. That is a good one. There's so much you could do with that. I guess straight away your head jumps to the typical, like stereotypical route that once you get a job, you get married kind of thing, and that is relationships. But really, it's actually so much more diverse than that. And that is almost not really what a relationship is, I guess, because you've got the relationships in work, you've got to build that relationship within volunteer work, I guess. You've also got relationships between countries kind of thing, like, and then it's not even just being together kind of thing. It's not just a partnership. It's kind of, wow, it's such a deep word when you really think about it. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to remind me of the question. What was the question again?
Well, it's what does relationship mean? And I think, like you just hinted, it is so broad because I guess, like you started to talk about personal relationships. I think my mind first went to positive relationships.
Yeah.
But then when you started to talk about all of the different types of relationships, I was thinking, well, actually, all relationships are not good, and there's still relationships,
Yeah.
and they've got various elements within them, some of which might be healthier than others. But exactly like you say, it's probably one of the most complex words that we could have chosen.
Yeah.
What about the metaphor part of it? So if you think about relationships, what does it look like, feel like, and sound like?
I guess it's kind of now thinking about kind of interactions kind of thing, because every interaction is a relationship.
Yeah.
So, it's just so complex. Like, I guess a big thing that I always focus on within my work is co-production, and that can't be achieved without building those relationships. And I think that's where the issue comes from, because you need those foundation relationships and you need that awareness to kind of build that foundation so that you can work well together.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that I do within the children's hospital is that services are designed without young people when this service is for young people. So young people should be included. And it's because the relationship isn't there between the young people and the people that work kind of thing. You need that co-production because yes, we need the place to be functional so that nurses, doctors, occupational therapists, all the people that work there can do their job, but equally you need it to be functional because for a service user, because they need to be able to have a good stay, have a positive experience, because hospitals are so often associated with negative, and that's all built on a relationship. Yet that relationship so often isn't formed because co-production isn't used. So I guess like relationships are like, it's just everywhere. It could be a relationship that you have with food. It could be a relationship that you have with your home. Like it could be
Yeah.
how you are with reading, learning, dislikes, likes. Like it really does shape your life on what interactions you have.
Yeah, and that's a fantastic point to broaden it beyond personal relationships, because, like you say, it can be. So, for instance, I've supported a football club since I was 7 years old, and my relationship there is as strong as many other relationships. And then the other thing that comes to mind when you were talking about the young children, the design of the experience, and all the rest of it, I think there's something about a relationship, maybe whatever it is, but maybe not. Now we've broadened it beyond the personal stuff. But it strikes me that what's really important is to have clarity of purpose
Yeah.
for the relationship. So, if you were saying it's really important that these designers have a relationship with the young people because they need to design something that is appropriate, then there's an understanding on both sides, hopefully, of why it's important that that relationship is there. I'm just trying to think about, does that not apply anywhere to some of the things that you started to mention that are not about personal relationships?
That's a good point.
So you mentioned relationship with food, for instance. Does the same point about you need to be clear about your purpose
Yeah.
or your relationship with food in order for it to be useful and healthy?
Yeah. And that's something like I hugely want to advocate more for, because I think with like the obesity crisis, but then also the cost of living crisis, is so much promoted that we need to be healthier. But what is healthy? And
Yeah,
it's what I think healthy is and what I think should be promoted more, because I've fallen into that trap. And I know many young people that have, that you need to build that healthy relationship with food. It's not having that healthy diet, because you can't have that healthy diet if you don't have that healthy relationship, because that can cause so many problems within itself. So a relationship doesn't need to be with a person. It can be also, it might be a healthy relationship with exercise, because that could cause so many health issues, or even a healthy relationship with your work, because so easily you can become that work is your life when
yeah,
really there's so much more to life. And that again, that addiction, well, now relationships and addiction, like that's it, just you just kind of snowball it, you know what I mean? Like there's so many connotations, so many thoughts that can come with it. But that's, I guess, the negative side of a relationship. Well, it depends if you've got a good or a bad relationship with it, but how a relationship too strong, I guess, with your work or with something else that kind of depends on you, that you
yeah.
lose that balance kind of thing.
So what about the question? You use the word, or we've used the term healthy relationships. So taking this out this broad context that we've arrived at, which embraces both person to person relationships, both one to one to group, group to one, all of that, and also relationships with things. Let's just call them that for now. If we were to explore what constitutes a healthy or unhealthy relationship, what sort of things would come forward there for you?
This, I guess, is very relevant at the moment, but I would say there's an unhealthy relationship between sometimes the people in the country and the government. especially at the moment. I think that's where my head straight away goes. And especially very applicable for me, like trying to become a nurse, is between the nurses and the government. Because the way the government are portraying the nursing strike is like we're doing it out of selfishness, that we want this huge pay rise, that we want this. I don't get paid at the moment because I'm a student, but more like this is what they think nurses want, when really what they want is to have a safe ward. They want to be able to have a 13.5 hour shift where they get a break and they get to go home on time. It's not about the money. But then you watch the news and the government are portraying it like we want all this money, because at the end of the day, the wage that they get, it is livable, but it's not livable if you want a family, if you want to have a work-life balance, if you want to not be at work stressed all day and not get a break, and then end up working 15, maybe 18-hour shift, which is just ridiculous. And the government aren't building that relationship, that good relationship to make an agreement. They're building that negative relationship where it's just ending up two groups of people that are ending up to hate each other because they can't build this good relationship and they can't build this good agreement because they're just both seeing it from two very different angles.
Yeah, so the words that are coming forward here for me are, at least there are probably others, but respect and understanding.
Yeah.
Because and I agree with you, I think, and I think authenticity is another one actually, because what you've described as the position that the government is taking, I'm not so sure that that's a very authentic one. You know, it's more like there's an ulterior motive, and so it suits them to get the general public thinking badly of the nurses, and then maybe they won't have to spend so much money on resolving the situation. But there is this piece about if you did respect the other side, and if you invested time and energy in an understanding the point of view of the other side, rather than just putting all of your energy into entrenching your own position, just think how much more fruitful that relationship could be.
Definitely. And something that you just brought up that kind of made me think of it, kind of, I don't know what qualifications, to be honest, what qualifications the government had. So I might be talking a load of rubbish because I don't know the evidence kind of thing. But it doesn't feel like the government represent the people, in the sense that I feel like the health secretary should be someone that potentially was a nurse, was a doctor, someone that has that lived experience. Because a lot of the work that I do is through expert by experience. And that's something a degree can't give you. That's something that you can't do in an apprenticeship. That's genuine lived experience. And yes, the government do represent some of the people, but they don't represent everyone. And that's why we kind of need a government that has people from this background. Someone that, yes, might have gone to private school, but we also need someone that has been to a public school and potentially came from a poor background, potentially been homeless. We need someone that represents everyone in this world, because how can you write a policy? How can you be authentic with the nurses and have compassion if you've never experienced it and you have no clue really what is properly happening on the wards?
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is really topical for me at the moment because I've been involved with an organization that does really good work, but their senior management is all white middle class. Not all, but most. And the area that they're working in is really heavily involved with racial discrimination. But the question is, if you've never been subject to racial discrimination, how can you possibly have a full handle on it, making your choices and decisions in your role? And for me, this begs a really big question, because in recruitment in organizations, in my experience in my career as I grew up, just about 100% of the focus was on your capability, your technical capability to be able to do the job. But recently I've been thinking, actually, if you were to take into account, like you've mentioned, lived experience and also future potential, and add those two criteria to the, what are you currently capable of? then perhaps that would result in very different choices when you're choosing a candidate. And also, it would allow you to be able to be strongly behind, we chose this person because they might be a bit shorter than the other candidate in terms of current technical capability, but we believe that they more than make up for that in terms of life experience and future potential. So then it kind of pushes away this argument, oh, you didn't choose the best person for the job. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, because I do think that sometimes the people that are right for the job right now, they've potentially been given those opportunities that someone from an ethnic background might not have got that opportunity. And it's also looking at whether they're neurodiverse, whether they potentially have a healthcare inequality or just any inequality that has prevented them from being able to have those equal opportunities, because they will have the capability. And it's whether you can see that potential, that they're passionate, they're willing to build those relationships and work hard, kind of thing. Because I've actually just taken on, as part of the youth advisory group, inequality lead at the Children's Hospital.
Okay.
And that's inequality has been a huge passion of mine, because so often life is determined by people that don't have that lived experience. So the basic example is for things like, let's say it's a wheelchair user. Well, there's a cafe that the tables are too close together, there's steps. Well, this person that has put that step in, that's put the tables too close together, haven't put an accessible toilet, they're able-bodied individuals that have never had this lived experience, and they haven't consulted with other people. So they haven't had that opportunity. Yes, it's a cafe, but you can apply that to other situations. So they haven't been able to have that opportunity to go to that cafe because of something else that someone else is controlling, that is out of their control, because they haven't had that lived experience. So it's kind of the same with that job. And how can you do something towards like ethnic minorities, Black Lives Matter, if you haven't had that lived experience? Because that's out of your control, what you can get involved, what you can make the best of a situation, but equally there are some things that are in your control and some things that aren't. So it's about making sure that you have got that diverse network and that diverse range of people within a board, so that you can have that lived experience and make sure that you're getting the voices across. Because like you said, they might not have the skills right in this day, but they will have other skills based on their life experience, because everyone's got a wealth of knowledge from life experience, and they would have had different interactions with people. And it's not necessarily knowing the most about, let's say it was engineering, but then you've also got the communication part. You've got to be able to work with different people, build those relationships. And sometimes you just can't make that connection if you haven't had that lived experience, whereas that person can offer so much different. It's not all down to getting A stars, getting firsts in your degree. It's kind of down to what can you offer because of your lived experience as well. Obviously having the qualifications is useful too, but it's what else can you build with that?
Yeah, and you know that what you're making me think about here is how well we are equipped. Because what we've been talking about here is how critically important relationships are, right? And so where my mind went was, well, if that's true, which undoubtedly it is, then how are we equipped in order to build strong relationships? And then I started to think, well, at school, for instance, there was zero in terms of, that, okay, you were left to build the relationships on your own. But as far as education was concerned or practice was concerned, the school took no responsibility actually for equipping the students with these relationship skills. Has that changed very much? Because you're obviously a lot closer to that than I am now.
I don't think so, because there's so many opportunities out there, but it's like finding that relationship, finding that way to get to that. And I've been lucky in the sense that I found one opportunity that then led to another, then led to another. And that made me have more lived experience. And I've just had natural lived experience through how my life has formed, kind of thing. But no, they don't really teach you how to build those relationships, how to find this thing out there. Yes, at sixth form, for example, they tell you you now should apply for university, but they're not giving you those options. There's so many different things you can do other than university. They might say, oh, you could do an apprenticeship kind of thing, but it's about finding those relationships, finding those opportunities. They just offer what they know. They're not offering you a like diverse range of things that you can get involved in. And I don't really feel like education, yes, there's a lot of people, but I don't think it's very person-centered, which is hard to make it person-centered. But the skills that a young person can bring is so undervalued. So I'm part of this movement called I Will, and it's a youth empowerment movement to help promote young people to take opportunities. And there's this girl that I've worked with quite a bit, and she is amazing. She's working on a book, and she also does like sessions on how to promote young people to take opportunities and how to actually get opportunities for yourself based on lived experience, your passion, and widening, kind of like opening your eyes to the opportunities that are around you. There's so many that you just don't know about. And through the I Will movement, like I could list hundreds of people, well, maybe not hundreds, but a lot of people that I've met that are just doing so many amazing things out there, but I just never knew about them. And there are things that I would love to get involved in. I just stumbled across I Will on Instagram. And it's just, but once you find it, it's there, but they don't teach you at school about finding these opportunities, about getting involved. They just offer what they know. They don't offer, they're not actively out there searching, because they're not teaching us to actively search. And I think you could learn so much more than what's within school from all these different roles. I probably shouldn't, but I probably spend more time on my volunteer work than I do on my degree. But I think I am learning probably more from that than I am from my degree. My degree is very important, and I completely respect that, because I need that degree to get a job, and I am learning plenty. But I think those skills are so transferable and taught me so much that has really benefited my degree so much.
Yeah, there's an organization called Pilot Light. It's run by a guy called Ed Mayo, and they're a charity that basically they match corporate organizations with volunteering organizations, because volunteering is so beneficial to everyone involved. And yeah, I probably spend, I don't know, 40 or 50% of my time doing volunteer-based work. So I founded the Global Values Alliance. I work with the UK Values Alliance. We founded World Values Day. A couple of years ago, created a global poetry showcase. And none of this stuff is beneficial in terms of being able to pay the bills, but you meet just some brilliant people as a result. Oh, let me tell you a quick story on that, actually. So a couple of years ago, I was invited to do a talk to senior students at a school near Phoenix in Arizona. They wanted to have somebody talk to them about values-driven leadership. So I was happy to do this and agreed to do it pro bono. And so I had like the pre-call with the teacher. And during the conversation, I just said, you know, does your school have a set of values? And she said, no. And I said, well, what do you think about having a set of values? How would you like that? And she said, well, that would be amazing, but how would we do it? So I said, well, what about if I provided the students with a process and they did the work, and I just kind of handheld them through the process and see how far we go. So long story short, they polled the parents, alumni, teaching faculty. They run a values storytelling showcase for the school students. And from all of that data, they distilled it down into a set of 5 core values that they presented to the Board of Governors. And the governors were just bowled away by, you know, how professional this was. And these students were the seniors, so that they were just about to leave. So effectively, that was their legacy for the school. Imagine that on your CV, that you were able to leave a school with a set of values. Now, I'll just quickly finish it. Fast forward a couple of years, the principal has now been funded to create a platform for teaching children in rural communities.
Oh, wow.
And so I'm now speaking to him about some of the things that I do, and maybe I'll be able to help him with that. So it is this thing, like you said about earlier, you said you don't know that it's there and you don't know where it's going to go. And I think sometimes, particularly in the education system, actually, it's focused on what we do know and what we predict is going to happen, rather than entertaining the thought of what we don't know and what might happen. And that is so restrictive.
Yeah.
Okay. So something else about relationships is their importance. And when you were talking about school, I remember, this is going to sound really snobby now, but my eldest daughter, when she was young, wanted to have a horse. So eventually she got a horse. And she therefore was part of that horsey community. And that opened up loads of doors for her.
Yeah.
And on the one hand, I'm kind of thinking, oh, Alan, where are you going with this? Because I I don't advocate, like the privilege because of your wealth and background side of things. But I think the point is still valid that by getting involved in that community, she was able to make things happen that would not have happened if she hadn't been part of that community. And that strikes me as being quite similar to some of the experiences that you were describing.
Yeah, definitely. And it is about the things that you don't know about. It's when you step into that, you don't know all the possibilities that could happen, yet so many things come from it. And it's like that opportunity of simply having a horse that you meet all these people, and then you suddenly look back and think, well, imagine if that hadn't happened to me. And that's the same with the children's hospital. Prior to volunteering at children's hospital, I'd done the odd little thing, but it wasn't really anything that took up much of my time, kind of thing. And it literally was complete chance that I found the opportunity, and I'm a completely different person for it. And so many things have happened for it, like amazing things that I'm just so thankful for. And I look back and I think it was utter chance that I found this. I just genuinely can't believe that if I didn't find that, then how different my life would be.
Actually, you just reminded me. I hadn't made this connection actually. So this is the first book I co-authored, and when we submitted the manuscript, the publisher said you need to have a dedication at the front of the book, and we hadn't really thought about this. So I remember the conversation with Alison, the co-author, and she said, "What about we could dedicate this to our family and friends and loved ones?" So I don't think I was very polite, actually. I remember thinking, "Oh my God, that's so dull." And I said, "Well, can we do better than that?" And we played around with it a bit, and this is what we came up with, which has got the word relationships in it. So it is, we dedicate this book to the alchemy of relationships, curiosity, and serendipity, because it seems that when you're willing to invest time in relationships and you're willing to be curious, sometimes those magical things that you just described can happen.
Yeah. And it's when you invest times in things, you get a whole different experience. It's like for student nursing, I'm like on a rotational placement. So I go to different areas and I'll go to an area. I like to think that I try and put a lot into it and try and find myself opportunities within it. And I've come back from every single placement loving it. But then I hear these negative experiences about these placements, and it's kind of, I think if they put more into it, I'm not saying they're not trying their hardest. I'm sure they are. It's more trying to find those opportunities, trying to get involved more. There's so much more you can get out of life if you put so much more into it and finding the best of a situation. I'm not saying you should always be like, yes, I'm okay, living the best life, because life isn't like that. Things are tough. But if you're always finding that positive out of that negative, like a lot of my lived experience probably wasn't brilliant. And at the time, I was thinking, what the hell? Why is this happening? But now I look back and think all the positive things that have come out of it, because I've tried to make a positive out of the negative, has given me so much to life, which I never would have imagined of. I'm now almost thankful that bad stuff happened. I'm not hugely thankful, but it's given me so much when you look at the positive side and try and find those opportunities within the negative kind of thing. And it's like the Black Lives Matter community. It has brought so many positive things from such negative thing. That is something I wish never happened, believe me. But I equally think it has brought so many people together. It has brought communities together. People are more educated. And although it's a horrible, horrible thing that happened, is something that will stay in history forever and hopefully bring people together forever, linking back to kind of relationships again, which I didn't even mean to do that. So relationships are literally everywhere. Like finding that positive relationship out of something that can be quite so negative, can really bring about so much.
Definitely. And it's this thing around shared experience, I think, is what deepens relationships, whether that's a good shared experience or a bad shared experience, actually.
Yeah.
Um, and you've reminded me of a story. It was about two people working for an organization. One was based in London and was like in an operational role. The other was based, so I can't remember where, but somewhere in America, and was based in a finance role. And the two of them were just fighting all the time. It, just didn't get on. And then they had a senior leaders gathering, and both of them were part of the senior leadership team. There's like 100 people or whatever it was. And part of the program of this gathering was that a number of cardboard boxes were delivered, and the group was split up into groups of 10, and these two guys were on the same team. And what was explained was that in the box was bicycle parts, and their task within the next 90 minutes or a time frame was to build these bikes. And they were told that there was pressure on them because the customers were arriving in 90 minutes time to collect their bikes. And then the bikes were actually a donation to a local disadvantaged children's school, and the kids came to collect their bikes and wheel them away. And you can imagine it was quite emotional. And these two guys were both like shedding tears, and from that day, never had a problem again.
Yeah.
So it's partly to do. I think a lot of it is to do with what you were saying about. I think we sometimes don't realize how much impact we can have on the relationship.
Yeah.
But the other part of it as well is how relationships are influenced a lot by the environment that we're experiencing the relationship within.
Yeah, I really like that story because it shows how much one positive interaction, one positive experience with that relationship can completely transform it. But then
Yeah.
you flip it and you have one negative thing. But I like to think that a positive outweighs negative in the sense that if you have one negative experience slash relationship, you can kind of move past that. Whereas a positive one is so much more stronger because that has completely changed their relationship just because of one positive interaction. And it kind of links back to, like, I think from relationships as well, learning from each other, because you might actually not have shared experience, but I love listening to people's stories. That's what I love about the I Will movement, learning from different people's backgrounds, the way they've gone through youth action work and all these different things. I think sometimes you can build the best relationships from being so different and having such a different life because you can learn from their lived experience and then being able to share your lived experience and just bringing that together is, I just find it so interesting hearing about different people's lives.
Yeah. Have you seen the I think it's Coca-Cola video of, it's like an advert, but they basically take people from totally different backgrounds. Let me see if I can remember this right. They put them around a table and they're blindfolded. They talk about themselves. And so, for instance, one I think I remember is one guy, he's really into extreme sports. And then they take their blindfolds off, and he's the one in the wheelchair, I think. So, and everybody else around the table is like, I had a completely different picture of you
Yeah.
than you were describing yourself. And I love what you're saying there about how difference is, I love difference. It's like meeting somebody that I don't know why I've got Japan in my mind. I think it's because when I've been in Japan, that's the most kind of out of the water I've ever felt, because
Yeah.
no, I remember I went out, I was in Tokyo on business, but I went out of Tokyo on the weekend. And I just remember sitting on this quite busy train and realizing that I was the only non-Japanese person on this train. And because we live in such a cosmopolitan world, that was like,
Yeah.
oh, that's really uncomfortable. And
Yeah.
also the language is like not just different, but it's different alphabet. It's just completely, you have no idea. And I love that, being able to just, like you say, learn and really take in something that is completely different. But we're straying off, I guess, a little bit there. But it does come back to what we were talking about, what makes a healthy relationship. And I think curiosity actually is another one of these facets of a healthy relationship. So, and actually, whether that's about, you talked about food. I think curiosity about food is a really great thing, because it's only through the curiosity that you start to learn things that maybe you would have not bothered with, and you just bowl forward either for good or for bad.
Yeah, I love curiosity. That has got to be my favorite thing, or my excuse of being nosy kind of thing. But polite way of saying that I'm a very nosy person. But then curiosity, it gets you a long way, especially within nursing. I think it's one of the most important things, is to be curious so that you can learn more about the situation. But equally in everyday life, there's no harm in being curious. Yes, there is a line that you don't want to overstep, but learning from each other. Like, I think we're sometimes so focused on stereotypes, like your story about the person that's a wheelchair user. Like, we're so focused on stereotypes and almost what life should be, which kind of links back to the very first stereotype of where my head jumps in relationships. We're so focused on that stereotype of what we should do in our job and what we should do in life, that we should buy a house, we should have kids, we should do this, when really, if we were curious, went away from this path and we moved away from these stereotypes. And the stereotype that has been a huge thing that I've been trying to advocate for is the stereotype of how young people are lazy, on their phones, they're moody and all that. Like, if we move away from those stereotypes, that's when I feel like we can truly start not living, but you know what I mean, like building that better network, a better world where we build those relationships. Because so often we start on a negative relationship because we've already got a stereotype in our head of what we think that person's going to be like. And if they weren't blindfolded in that situation, they might have thought totally different. And it's like the respect you get when people start from a base, from scratch, rather than starting from a stereotype of what you think that person's going to be from the start. You can build a totally different relationship. I do it all the time. Like, I'm no better than the next person about stereotypes and thinking what someone's going to be like. But you don't know what an experience is going to be like until you give it a proper shot, rather than basing it off what you think it's going to be like.
I'm thinking, there's so much work that's been done in the area of discrimination, right? And so yes, progress has been made as far as gender is concerned. Probably that's the one where most progress has been made, even though it's not great progress. And then you've got race and sexual orientation and others. But actually, I think that one of the biggest forms of discrimination is young people. And so I was going to say age then, but that could be all the way. But specifically about young people, because it strikes me that as far as relationships are concerned, many adults don't even think that children or young people qualify to have a proper relationship, because they're just kids. And yet I remember I was in Geneva with a professor at a university. I was giving a talk to the students there, and we went out for dinner, and it was the night that, what's he called? The Formula One, Verstappen, that's it, Max Verstappen.
Yeah.
So I think he was 16 years old when he gained his first podium position. So finishing in the top 3 in a Formula One race at 16.
That's incredible.
It is incredible. I follow football. The other day, somebody came on for Liverpool. I think he was 16 or 17.
Yeah, I was watching the game actually. Yeah.
Okay. So if people are good enough at that age in those environments, why can't we be a bit more open-minded about in other environments? Why can't young people make more of a contribution?
Exactly. And it's young people that are going to be on this planet for the longest, in the sense of longest as in the future, that way of looking at it. Although people like undervalue young people, I think. And it's not a huge discrimination in the fact that we're not being, I would say, actively, like, people aren't being violent towards us or like physically bad. I don't know what the word is, but that kind of like, it's not something that's really bad, but it is really bad in the sense that very undervalued, not really listened to, and quite often ignored in kind of almost not neglect, but in the sense that we're just co-production isn't you being properly used because we're being ignored. If you think of how many young people are, for example, trying to improve climate change, and we're just totally ignored. And it's like, you just want people to open up their eyes sometimes. It's like, how much do we need to say? Whereas let's say someone that was a bit older, had a bit more of a powerful position, and people opened their eyes to said that, they'd listen straight away. But because it's young people saying it, nothing's really happening. Because that's the thing with climate change. We've got all the resources, we've got everything we need. Young people are shouting about it, yet the leaders that can implement change aren't. And yes, they've got these plans that by 2050, the UK will be net zero, but there's nothing between that. It's like, just looked at tomorrow's problem, not today's problem.
Yeah.
And it's an example. When I was at work the other day, I had a parent that completely respect their opinion, is theirs, but they were telling me about how young people, they're just constantly on their phones, a bit of a waste of space. And I didn't realize really quite how bad people see this. And then I mentioned it to someone else and I was like, yeah, I've had that too. And yes, I've had this from someone else. And it's like, I don't know, like, it's just built on stereotypes. Like, young people definitely have a voice, and it's whether young people believe they have a voice. Because once you hear that people think that you're a waste of space, but then you're not going to voice your voice or take those opportunities because you do believe it. And when you haven't heard anything else positive, it's just sad kind of thing. I've kind of lost where I'm going with this, but the words just aren't coming.
No, that's okay, because actually there's something that you said just now that I'm really curious about, because when you said it's not really bad and nobody is kind of violent and all of those things, it's not really bad. It made me think of a parallel with systemic racism and microaggressions, right? Which similarly is not overtly visible and bad, but it is suppressive. And therefore it is bad.
Yeah, it's hurtful in like a different way, I guess, kind of thing.
Yeah,
Because we're
it's
really
kind of,
having to put a lot of work in to get not very far, kind of
yeah,
thing.
because
And young,
it kind of says you don't matter. You
yeah,
don't count, or you don't have value to add, and we'll decide when you do. Wow. And
and it,
sorry, the one final thing about young
no,
people.
no, no, go for it.
The other thing is that I think that young people are less kind of browbeaten, and they still have bright eyes and passion and want things to happen. Whereas once you get a bit older, it's kind of, you just lose some of that. And another story, it was a lady saying she was really proud of her daughter. So her daughter, I think, was 8 years old, and they had like a contest for the head of school, or head of year or something like that. And so she was in a short list of 3 or 4 other children. And what they had to do was go to the front of the class and explain why they would make a good head of year.
Mm.
And this lady told the story that her daughter went to the front of the class and she just said, all I can say is that I will be kind to all of you. And it's just, oh,
Yeah,
and an adult, can you imagine our leaders
yeah,
saying, we're going to write our manifesto based on kindness?
yeah. And that's just such an important value. Like, if everything was done out of kindness, how much of a better place the world would be. And I do think that, kind of going back to a previous point, that today is a day which has plenty of opportunities that no other generation have experienced, which is amazing. And we're in a completely different world. But the amount of opportunities I've applied for, and they said, oh, we'll accept it if you had more experience. But how am I going to get this experience if no one will accept these opportunities? But then equally, bringing that kind of co-production idea back, young people of today, we're the only ones that have lived today as a young person. So we're the only ones with that viewpoint. And that's why our viewpoint is equal to any other viewpoint. I completely respect people at any age, any point of their life, because they're the only ones that have lived today at today's age, at
Yeah.
today's path of their life kind of thing. And you're the only one that's lived your life. So every life is so unique and can bring so much because you're the only one that's lived that life. But that's why I feel everyone in society should be seen more equally and treated with more equity, in the sense that everyone's unique and everyone can offer so much, and it's very undervalued. It's almost like today in society that some people can offer more than the next person. Well, they can't. They can offer something different. And the leaders are almost becoming more powerful, and the general public, I guess, are becoming less powerful, in the sense that that gap is getting bigger. And that's the way that we're being perceived in society, when really the gap, there isn't a gap. There never was one. There never will be one. We've just got all very different lives, can all offer something very different.
Yeah, and I get where you're coming from, and so I think one of the big challenges is around social mobility, because once what you've described, in terms of the gap getting bigger and people having their life horizons set from an early age,
Yeah.
maybe through multiple generations, it becomes more and more difficult to break that mold. So
Yeah.
you imagine a third generation young person that is unemployed. And most of the people they know are unemployed, and their relatives are unemployed, and their parents are unemployed, and their grandparents are unemployed. So that is their paradigm. And so, their relationships are going to necessarily be very confined. And so the question is, how can we create an opportunity for relationships to be started and built outside of people's bubble?
Yeah.
And I've really no idea what the answer is.
Yeah. Because, yeah, building on what you said, like, I don't want it to sound like my point before was kind of, I remember someone, I think it was on Love Island, said in an interview, we all have the same 24 hours. So it's up to you what you do with it. And that, are no, loads of people were against it, because at the end of the day, like what you said, we don't all have the same 24 hours. And she was kind of promoting the fact that, well, you're in that position because you've controlled it. Well, no, there's third world things. There's generations before you're even born that have already controlled things that are going to happen in your life. But the point that I was kind of going for, because I don't want to get this across wrong, is that someone that has lived in the cost of living crisis and really been affected by that, because they're the only ones that have lived their life, they're the ones that can fix that problem, in the sense that they can't fix it, but if they worked with the government, because the government were willing to build that relationship. Because someone that is, I have no clue, to be honest, what's going on in the government as in names, but for someone that is the person trying to solve the cost of living crisis, well, they haven't experienced it. They're probably there during their M&S shop, living in a lovely flat with their heating on full blast. They don't have to worry about the fact that they can only have one meal a week, a proper meal. They don't have to worry about all this. So how are they going to solve the problem when they don't know what that life is like? So it's kind of, if we built those better relationships, then we would be able to have that person that has that lived experience, that has been in that life, because they are the experts of that situation. How can they help fix that problem? Because they probably have plenty of ideas, they're just not listened to.
Yeah, I agree. And so I don't know if you know, but my first career was in commercial hospitality management. So I used to run
Oh,
five-star hotels and conference centers and that sort of thing. And a lot of my work is about how do you set up an organization to deliver a fantastic customer experience, whatever it is.
yeah.
And I think going back to, remember you mentioned the cafe with the tables too high or too close together and the wheelchair
Yeah.
thing. I think apart from asking somebody who is in a wheelchair, the other thing you can do is just put yourself in all of your customers' shoes or position in order to create that design. And you've reminded me of a guy I used to work with, and what he used to do was go to every bedroom over, not in one go, but just over a time. And he would sit in the bath, not with the water in or anything, just get in the bath, because he said that's when you can see whether the pipes under the basin are showing and whether they're dirty and, all of that sort of thing. So I think this thing about relationships, apart from respect and understanding, it's this thing about the empathy of really putting yourself in the other person's shoes
Yeah.
in order to understand them, rather than you put your view of the world on them.
Yeah, definitely.
This has been a fascinating conversation, Beth, and I'm conscious of time, and we need to get to wrap it up. And there is a question that we use to wrap these sessions up, and that is this: so what are you encouraged to do differently about relationships as a result of our conversation?
So I think, kind of summarizing what we've said, kind of thing, I think the thing that needs to change is stereotypes. We all have that stereotype, and literally just based off what you just said, we all make assumptions of what we think other people are feeling, what other people are seeing, what other people are experiencing, when there's so much you don't know about people's lives and how they live it and what they're feeling. It's whether we forget those stereotypes and kind of move past them and listen, engage, build those relationships, try and witness. You can only witness to a limit by trying to be in someone's shoes, because you're going to learn from the people around you. But there is a limit that you can learn from putting yourself in their perspective, kind of thing, and listening to what they think rather than straight away making assumptions, basing your thoughts off stereotypes. So I think that's the thing that needs to change with relationships, trying our best to start from scratch rather than starting from a stereotype or an assumption.
Okay. And so if I was to ask you to translate that into something personal and concrete, what would that look like in terms of a first step for you?
I guess applying it to young people, which is a lot of things that I do, would be that I wouldn't want young people to be perceived as kind of lazy, moody, and all those kind of things, and the things that young people really aren't. There might be one person that's like that, but it's not 99% or something. Like, it's not everyone. And some young people have so much to offer, but because of these assumptions and stereotypes, we aren't able to build those relationships as easily, and we aren't able to get those opportunities, and we aren't able to work with people so well. Like, I do think young people have amazing opportunities which no other generation have had, but equally we're having to fight 10 times harder and break down those stereotypes rather than just being treated for who we are right now, rather than being treated for potentially what people think we were, kind of thing, or think we are.
Yeah, okay. And mine is I've recently been introduced to the guy who's responsible for schools in Greenwich.
Oh, wow.
And this was through somebody else, through a tree planting project. And we started talking about young people. And originally, my conversation with this guy was going to be about Greenwich schools taking part in the Global Poetry Showcase. But I think following this conversation, I'm gonna ask him whether there is a way for us to give young people a better voice. And I don't know what the parameters around that would be, because there would need to be some initially.
Yeah.
But it's about how could we create some parameters and give young people, a voice that the council would be able to respond to and act upon, and prove that they've done something as a result.
Yeah, I like the way that you said act upon and prove on, because the amount of things that young people are taking as token gestures to be like, yeah, tick
Exactly.
that box.
Yeah.
We've spoke and consulted young people we've completely ignored and didn't listen to what they say, but we've consulted them. And it's that making sure that there was a positive change, making sure that there was acted upon, whether you agree with it or not, but it's that young person that's going to be infected, or young people in future generations, and they're the only ones that have lived that. So you've got to go by it because they are the expert within this field. So yeah, I really like that. Sounds
And
pretty cool.
it's this thing about valuing the opinion. So just to finish on a really random off beam story. So when I ran this hotel, my last hotel, I we had a system in place where any customer feedback was tracked, and then when we did something about it, we told the customer. So I remember sending, I think it was a letter because it was that long ago, um, but it was a letter telling the customer that we had replaced the carpet in the corridors that they had recommended something like 9 months before. And, okay, maybe they thought it shouldn't have taken that long. Our decision was that we had other things that we wanted to spend our money on until that point. But I
Yeah,
think in terms of valuing the relationship, that was really important to let people know that eventually something had happened as a result of what they had said. So
yeah.
okay, so well, thank you for that. I'm really looking forward to this conversation with this guy now. When it was going to be so narrow, it's now going to be. I hope I don't scare him off.
You'll have to let me know how it goes. It
I
sounds, yeah,
will.
it could be really positive. Yeah.
So, Beth, thank you so much for this time for us to have a values jam. And now you're a fully fledged values jammer.
Thank you. I actually really enjoyed that. It was really good. Yeah, thank you.
Okay.